It is the year 2026, and here's the question that nobody dares to ask themselves. Will you enter this new year as the same person you've always been, or will you become someone completely unrecognizable? Because let me tell you something that most self-improvement content will never admit. Most people who watch motivational videos, who consume endless content about change and transformation, who tell themselves every January that this is finally their year, they end up exactly where they started. Not because they lack willpower, not because they're lazy, but because they're approaching transformation from the wrong angle entirely. The Stoics understood something 2,000 years ago that modern psychology is only beginning to rediscover. Real change doesn't come from motivation. It doesn't come from temporary bursts of energy, and it certainly doesn't come from consuming more content. Real change comes from philosophical principles that rewire how you see reality itself. The Stoics didn't seek comfort. They didn't chase happiness in the way we understand it today. They sought clarity, they sought discipline, and above all, they sought inner freedom. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the Roman Empire, wrote his Meditations not as a book for others, but as a manual to discipline his own mind. Epictetus, who started life as a slave, developed a philosophy so powerful that it freed him mentally long before he was freed physically. Seneca, one of the wealthiest men of his time, voluntarily practiced poverty to ensure that wealth would never control him. These 7 Stoic lessons I'm about to share with you are not theoretical philosophy. They're not ancient wisdom that sounds good but doesn't apply to modern life. These are battle-tested principles that have been used by emperors, slaves, and everyone in between to reset their entire existence. And they're more powerful today, in our age of infinite distraction and manufactured anxiety, than they ever were in ancient Rome. If you're serious about resetting your life in 2026, if you want discipline instead of dopamine, if you want transformation instead of temporary motivation, then subscribe to this channel right now, because what we're about to explore will fundamentally change how you operate in the world. Lesson 1. Accept what you cannot control. The first Stoic lesson that will reset your entire life is this. Accept what you cannot control and pour all of your energy into what you can. Epictetus, who understood human suffering better than almost anyone in history, said something incredibly simple yet profound. Some things are up to us, and some things are not. That's it. That's the foundation of Stoic philosophy and the beginning of all mental freedom. But here's what makes this so powerful in practice. Research shows that approximately 90% of human stress, anxiety, and suffering comes from trying to control things that are fundamentally outside of our control. We stress about what other people think of us, but their thoughts are not under our control. We ruminate about past mistakes, but the past cannot be changed. We worry obsessively about future outcomes, but the future hasn't happened yet. Think about your own life right now. How much mental energy are you spending on things that you have absolutely no power over? You're stressed about the economy, about politics, about whether people will like your content, about what your ex is doing, about whether you'll succeed or fail. And the cruel irony is that all of that mental energy you're spending on uncontrollable things is energy you're not spending on the few things you actually can control. Your effort, your attitude, your discipline, your reactions, your daily choices. The Stoics understood that when you stop fighting against reality, when you stop trying to control the uncontrollable, something magical happens. Your energy comes back, not because life gets easier, but because you're no longer wasting your limited mental resources on battles you can never win. Here's a practical exercise that will change your life if you actually do it. Every single morning, write down 3 things that are completely under your control today. Maybe it's your workout, maybe it's how you respond to criticism, maybe it's whether you do deep work or scroll social media. Then consciously acknowledge everything else and let it go. Stop trying to control whether your video goes viral. Control whether you make the best video you're capable of making. Stop trying to control whether people respect you. Control whether you act in respectable ways. This shift in focus is not just philosophical. It's the difference between chronic anxiety and genuine peace. Once you stop fighting reality and start working with what's actually in your power, your entire life begins to reset itself. Lesson 2. Master your inner dialogue. The second Stoic lesson is perhaps the most psychologically powerful one of all. You don't suffer from events themselves. You suffer from your interpretation of those events. Marcus Aurelius wrote something that modern cognitive psychology has spent decades proving. If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment. Think about what that means. Someone criticizes your work, you feel devastated, but your friend receives the exact same criticism and brushes it off. Same event, completely different suffering. Why? Because suffering doesn't come from the external world. It comes from the story you tell yourself about the external world. This is where the Stoics were thousands of years ahead of modern psychology. They understood that we live inside a constant narrative, an inner dialogue that interprets every single thing that happens to us. And for most people, that inner dialogue is brutal. It's negative, it's catastrophizing, it's filled with cognitive biases and limiting beliefs that were programmed into them by childhood, by society, by past failures. You don't even realize that 90% of your daily thoughts are automatic, unconscious patterns that you've been running for years. Someone looks at you the wrong way, and your subconscious immediately generates the story that they don't like you, that you're not good enough, that you're being judged. But here's the truth. That story is not reality. It's just your brain's interpretation, and interpretations can be changed. The Stoics practice something that modern psychology now calls cognitive reframing. They would actively challenge their automatic negative thoughts and replace them with more rational, empowering interpretations. You lose money, your automatic thought is, I'm a failure. The Stoic reframe is, this is a lesson that will make me wiser. You get rejected, your automatic thought is, I'm not good enough. The Stoic reframe is, this wasn't aligned, something better is coming. And here's what most people miss. Your conscious mind can set goals and make plans all day long. But if your subconscious is running old programs of unworthiness, self-sabotage, and fear, you'll never reach those goals. Most people try to change their life consciously with willpower and motivation, but they never reprogram the subconscious patterns that are actually driving their decisions, their emotions, and their behaviors. That's why the Stoics emphasize daily practice, daily review of thoughts, because they understood that mastering your inner dialogue is mastering your entire life. Lesson 3. Embrace voluntary discomfort. The third Stoic lesson is going to challenge everything modern society has taught you about comfort and happiness. Embrace voluntary discomfort, because whatever you avoid ends up controlling you. Seneca, one of the wealthiest and most powerful men in Rome, had a practice that sounds insane to modern ears. He would voluntarily sleep on hard floors, he would eat the simplest foods, he would wear cheap clothes, not because he had to, but because he chose to. He would literally practice being poor while he was rich. Why would someone do this? Because Seneca understood something profound. Comfort is a trap that breeds weakness, and the moment you need comfort to be happy, you've given away your power. The Stoics called this practice voluntary discomfort, and it's designed to do something specific to your psychology. When you voluntarily expose yourself to cold, to hunger, to physical challenge, to doing hard things you don't want to do, you're training your mind to be unbreakable. You're proving to yourself that you can handle discomfort, which means fear loses its grip on you. Think about how much of your life is controlled by the avoidance of discomfort. You don't start that business because it's uncomfortable to risk failure. You don't have that difficult conversation because it's uncomfortable to face conflict. You don't wake up early, you don't work out, you don't do deep work, all because your brain is optimizing for short-term comfort instead of long-term strength. Modern society has sold you a lie, that the goal of life is to be comfortable, to avoid pain, to maximize pleasure and minimize effort. But look at the result of that philosophy. Anxiety, depression, and weakness are at all-time highs, not because life is harder than it used to be, but because we've become psychologically fragile. We can't handle the smallest discomfort without needing to escape into social media, into food, into entertainment. The Stoics knew that real confidence, real resilience, real inner power comes from voluntarily doing the things you're afraid of. Take cold showers, not because they're pleasant, but because they train you to do hard things. Fast occasionally, not to punish yourself, but to prove that you're not controlled by comfort. Practice saying no, practice solitude, practice sitting with boredom instead of immediately reaching for your phone. Here's what happens when you embrace voluntary discomfort. You build a completely different identity. You become someone who doesn't need perfect conditions to be happy, someone who doesn't collapse when things get hard, someone who other people can't manipulate with threats of discomfort. Comfort makes you weak and dependent. Discomfort makes you sovereign and free. That's not motivational talk, that's Stoic reality. Lesson 4. Act as if you were watching yourself. The fourth Stoic lesson is about identity transformation. Act as if you were constantly watching yourself from the outside and become your own judge. Marcus Aurelius wrote his famous Meditations not as a book for public consumption, but as a private journal where he would criticize himself, correct himself, remind himself of his principles. He was essentially watching himself like a third party, evaluating whether his actions matched his values. This is Stoic self-surveillance, and it's one of the most powerful tools for behavioral change ever discovered. Here's why this works so well. Most people live on autopilot, reacting to circumstances without any conscious awareness of whether they're acting in alignment with who they want to be. They get angry and yell at someone. They procrastinate instead of working. They eat junk food. They scroll for hours. And they do all of this without any real conscious choice. But when you practice Stoic self-surveillance, when you imagine that you're watching yourself from outside your own body, everything changes. Suddenly, you have a choice. That version of you that's watching, that's your higher self, your ideal self, the person you're trying to become. And every action you take is either moving you closer to that person or further away. The Stoics had a simple but brutal question that they would ask themselves before every decision. Is this worthy of the best version of myself? Not, do I feel like doing this? Not, is this easy? But is this who I want to be? When you eat that junk food, is that the person you're trying to become? When you skip your workout, is that acting in accordance with your highest values? When you react with anger instead of responding with wisdom, is that worthy of who you claim you want to be? This question is a filter that instantly elevates your standards and your behavior. Most people have incredibly low standard for themselves, not because they don't want better, but because they never actually stop to evaluate whether their actions match their aspirations. If you want to truly reset your identity in 2026, if you want to become someone fundamentally different, you need to reprogram the subconscious habits that run your life on autopilot. Philosophy gives you the framework, but you also need tools that work at the level of automatic patterns. I've linked a powerful system below called the Subconscious Millionaire System. It's designed to help you rewire your inner patterns at the root, the beliefs and habits that operate below conscious awareness. This isn't a magic solution. It's a tool that complements the disciplined work you're already doing. But here's the key insight. When you combine Stoic self-surveillance with subconscious reprogramming, you create a person who not only knows what they should do, but actually does it consistently. That's the difference between knowledge and transformation. Lesson 5. Remove false desires. The fifth Stoic lesson is about liberation from invisible chains. Remove false desires, because most of what you think you want isn't actually yours. The Stoics made a crucial distinction between natural desires and false desires. Natural desires are things like food when you're hungry, rest when you're tired, meaningful work, genuine connection. False desires are everything else: status, validation, luxury, fame, comparison-driven goals. And here's the problem. Modern society, especially social media, has made false desires look like real needs. You think you need a certain level of wealth, a certain body, a certain lifestyle, but if you really examine those desires honestly, you'll realize they're not coming from inside you. They're coming from external programming. Seneca wrote about this extensively. He said that we're not truly living our own lives. We're living the lives that society expects us to live. We want things because other people want them, We pursue goals because we think they'll make us look successful. We buy things to impress people who don't even care about us. And the result is constant agitation, frustration, and emptiness because you're chasing targets that were never actually meaningful to you. The Stoics had a brilliant test for identifying false desires, and it's a question you should ask yourself about every goal you have. If no one was watching, if no one would ever know, if you couldn't post about it or tell anyone, would you still want this? Think about that honestly. Would you still want that expensive car if you couldn't show it off? Would you still want that follower count if no one knew what it was? Would you still pursue that career if it didn't come with status? If the answer is no, then that desire is false, and pursuing it will only lead to suffering. This doesn't mean you can't have nice things or achieve external success, but it means your motivation has to come from internal alignment, not external validation. The Stoics practiced what we might now call intentional minimalism, not poverty, but the conscious removal of desires that don't serve your actual well-being. When you remove false desires, something incredible happens. Your mind becomes clear. You stop being pulled in 1,000 directions by things that don't actually matter. You focus on the few things that are genuinely important to you, and you pursue them with intensity and peace. You're no longer comparing yourself to others because you're not playing their game anymore. You're playing your own game, with your own rules, based on your own values. This is what the Stoics called freedom. Not the freedom to have everything, but the freedom from needing anything external to be complete. In 2026, most people will chase more followers, more money, more status. But the Stoics would ask, what are you actually trying to feel? And can you generate that feeling internally without needing the external validation? That's the reset that changes everything. Lesson 6. Prepare for adversity daily. The sixth Stoic lesson is about psychological resilience. Prepare for adversity every single day because what you anticipate loses its power to break you. The Stoics had a practice that modern people find morbid or pessimistic, but it's actually one of the most psychologically sophisticated techniques ever developed. They called it the premeditation of evils, and it involves deliberately imagining the worst-case scenarios in your life. You imagine losing your money, your health, your relationships, your status. You imagine failure, rejection, humiliation, death. Not to make yourself depressed, but to make yourself unbreakable. Here's the psychology behind this. Most anxiety comes from uncertainty and from the fear of loss. We're afraid of what might happen. We're terrified of losing what we have. But when you actually spend time mentally rehearsing those scenarios, something counterintuitive happens. They lose their emotional charge. You realize that even in the worst-case scenario, you would survive, you would adapt, you would continue. Seneca said that we suffer more in imagination than in reality, and he was right. The anticipation of loss is often worse than the loss itself. So the Stoics would defang their fears by facing them mentally every single day. This practice has immediate applications in modern life. You're afraid to start that business because you might fail? Spend time actually imagining failure. What would really happen? You'd learn something, you'd pivot, you'd try again. The world wouldn't end. You're afraid of being rejected or criticized. Imagine it happening. Sit with that feeling and realize that you'd be okay. You're attached to your current lifestyle and terrified of losing it? Practice voluntary poverty like Seneca did, or at least imagine what you would do if everything disappeared tomorrow. Would you collapse, or would you rebuild? The Stoic premeditation of evils is not pessimism, it's preparation. It's the difference between being psychologically fragile, where any unexpected adversity shatters you, and being psychologically anti-fragile, where adversity actually makes you stronger. When you've already imagined and accepted the worst, nothing can surprise you, nothing can break you. You become emotionally prepared for whatever life throws at you. This is especially powerful for entrepreneurs, creators, anyone taking risks. Most people avoid risk because they haven't prepared themselves mentally for failure. But when you practice negative visualization, when you've already accepted that things might not work out, you become free to take bold action without being paralyzed by fear. In 2026, things will go wrong. You'll face setbacks. You'll lose things you care about. You'll fail at things that matter to you. The question is, will those adversities destroy you? Or will you have prepared yourself so thoroughly that you remain calm, adapt, and continue moving forward? The Stoics didn't just hope for the best, they prepared for the worst. And that preparation gave them a level of calm and courage that most people never experience. Start today. Take 5 minutes and imagine your biggest fear actually happening. Feel it, accept it, and realize that you would survive it. That's how you build real resilience. Lesson 7. Live as if this year defines you. The 7th and final Stoic lesson is the most urgent and transformative of all. Live as if this year defines your entire life. Because time is the one resource you can never get back. The Stoics were obsessed with mortality, not in a depressing way, but as a tool for clarity and urgency. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself that he could die at any moment, that every day might be his last. Modern people think that's morbid, but the Stoics understood that awareness of death is what makes life meaningful. When you truly internalize that your time is limited, suddenly all the trivial things you waste energy on become obviously stupid. Memento mori. Remember that you will die. Not someday in the distant future, but potentially soon. Maybe this year is your last year. Maybe you only have one more chance to become who you're capable of becoming. How would that change your behavior? Would you still spend hours scrolling social media? Would you still procrastinate on the work that actually matters? Would you still hold grudges, avoid difficult conversations, play it safe? Of course not. You would live with intensity, with purpose, with love, with courage. And here's the thing. You should be living that way anyway, because you don't actually know how much time you have. The Stoics had a brilliant reframe for this. They saw each year as a miniature life. Each year has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Each year is an opportunity to transform, to achieve, to become someone new. And most people waste it. They tell themselves they'll start next year, next month, next week. They drift through time unconsciously, and then suddenly they're at the end of their life wondering where it all went. But when you treat each year as if it's your only year, as if 2026 is your last chance to become who you're meant to be, everything changes. Here's a powerful exercise. Imagine it's December 31st, 2026. You're looking back on this year. What would make you proud? What would make you feel like you actually lived instead of just existing? Now imagine that on that same day, you find out you only have one more year to live. How would you spend 2027? The answer to that question is probably how you should be spending 2026. The Stoics didn't wait for a terminal diagnosis to start living with urgency. They practiced memento mori every single day to ensure they never wasted the time they had. If 2026 is the year you refuse to stay the same, if this is the year you actually become the person you've been talking about becoming, then you need to approach it with the urgency and discipline it deserves. Philosophy gives you the framework. Stoicism gives you the principles, but you also need to address the subconscious patterns that have been holding you back. Check the link below for the Subconscious Millionaire System. It's designed to help you reprogram the inner patterns that philosophy alone cannot change. This isn't about replacing Stoic discipline. It's about enhancing it with tools that work at the deepest levels of your psychology. So let's bring this all together. These 7 Stoic lessons are not just philosophical ideas. They're a complete system for resetting your life at the deepest level. Accept what you cannot control and pour your energy into what you can. That's freedom from anxiety. Master your inner dialogue because you don't suffer from events, but from your interpretation of events. That's freedom from victimhood. Embrace voluntary discomfort because whatever you avoid controls you. That's freedom through strength. Act as if you were watching yourself and become your own judge. That's freedom through self-awareness. Remove false desires because most of what you want isn't actually yours. That's freedom from comparison. Prepare for adversity daily because what you anticipate loses its power. That's freedom through resilience. And live as if this year defines you because time is the only resource you'll never get back. That's freedom through urgency. Stoicism is not about becoming emotionless. It's not about suppressing your humanity. or turning into a cold robot. It's about becoming unbreakable. It's about building a mind that cannot be shaken by external circumstances, a mind that remains calm in chaos, disciplined in distraction, and purposeful in uncertainty. The Stoics understood that external success is unreliable, other people are unpredictable, and the world will always be partially outside your control. But your mind, your character, your choices, those are yours. And when you master those, you become truly free. 2026 is not just another year. It's either the year you finally transform, or it's another year of the same patterns, the same excuses, the same mediocrity. The choice is entirely yours, and that choice is being made right now, in this moment. Are you going to treat this video like every other piece of content you've consumed, feel inspired for a few minutes, and then go back to your old life? Or are you actually going to implement these principles, actually going to do the work, actually going to become someone different? If you found value in this video, hit that like button right now. Leave a comment and tell me, which Stoic lesson hit you the hardest? Which one are you going to implement first? And if you're serious about discipline over dopamine, about transformation over temporary motivation, then subscribe to this channel because this is just the beginning. The Stoics have given us a blueprint for an unbreakable life, and we're going to explore every aspect of it together. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.